Welcome to the Game Deflators Podcast. My name is James.
And my name is John. We hope you'll stick around for our Whenever We Get to a podcast, where we're going to be discussing the game industry and a variety of trends and topics, including the new Nintendo Labo and some games that we've currently picked up.
All right, let's go ahead and get started with our crappy game challenge. And for those of you who are not familiar with this...
So the Crappy Game Challenge is essentially something that James and I have created where we'll go ahead and just pick something out of our game collection. It could be the crappiest game that we have, and the other individual is forced to play that for 30 minutes, write a review, and endure agonizing gameplay. So in my most recent challenge that I had, I was tasked with playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES. So essentially, this game is just a classic game, similar to a beat 'em up or Mario, where you just kind of walk around, side scroll, kill enemies as they come up on the screen using the Ninja Turtles. Bad part about it is you got 4 lives and a ridiculous amount of enemies that are constantly on screen. So during my time playing, James tasked me with getting to the dam, which I guess was the beginning of where things go crazy. Is that right, James?
No, correction. I challenged you with passing the underwater part of the dam, where you're refusing the bombs. You didn't make it there.
Oh yeah, so I didn't get past James's challenge. Regardless, the game sucked. So pretty much I didn't realize this first, but you have a little sewer when you first start the game, and you can either go in there or make your way to the left. Well, thing is on the left, when you go down to try and get to the next part of the level, a truck runs you over immediately. I lost 2 lives like that right off the bat. So shortly after I said, screw it, let me go to the sewers. I go in the sewers, and I just have enemies flying out of nowhere, trying to dodge. They come up way too close. I mean, you can't hit them unless you're right up on them. Enemies that take 3-4 hits right off the bat to try and kill. And it's just a stupid amount of dodging if you're not hitting anything. So made my way through, got to the dam with my 2 lives that were left, and it took all about 30 minutes because I was trying to be careful the entire time and not lose my 4 lives and risk having to start over pretty consistently. So the downside to this game is, for whatever reason, a ton of enemies were put in to the level, or all the levels. So you'll get to points in a game where it essentially freezes up on the screen and you're just kind of lagging along, or at least that was my experience with my copy. And you'll get to a point, at least for me when I got to the dam level, for example, I had probably 30 enemies at screen at the same time. I saw no physical way of being able to get past this without taking some health. And given that you're only with 4 lives, it's damn near impossible. I have no idea what the developers were thinking in this game. I honestly think they were just looking at all the other crap games that were out at the time that were nearly impossible to pass, and just figured, we'll throw something even crappier out. So, all in all, I didn't see any positives with this other than the cool cover art on the cart and that it was Ninja Turtles. I would honestly have given this like a 2 out of 10 personally. But I'll have you know, Nintendo Power back in the day gave it an 8.25 out of 10. So clearly somebody saw something that players did not.
It was probably the intro music. You know, the intro music is pretty catchy on that game.
Yeah, that might have been the 8.25 out of 10, the intro music.
Yeah.
The remaining 2 was probably for the game itself.
Yeah, as far as the weird slowdown effect, that's actually part of the game. That's a side effect on. I don't think the game wasn't well thought out and definitely wasn't well optimized, because, you know, even by then it should have been a known fact that the NES could only handle so many sprites on the screen at a time, and that's what was going on. That's why everything just slows to a crawl and practically, you know, freezes, because they loaded so much crap in every area. You know, it's just insane. But the game that John challenged me to is Blues Brothers 2000 on the N64. I actually just finished playing it this morning, and honestly, it's not that bad. I mean, it's an N64 game. The graphics are, even for an N64 game, the graphics are terrible. The music's okay. The gameplay is pretty mediocre. You know, I don't know if it quite deserves all the hate it gets. I got to the second stage where I pretty much got stuck because it's like, oh, you need to get into the sewer. To get there, you need to go to this door with the key. To get that, you need to get the key that's not here, and you can't make this jump from this tree to the sledge and other weird stuff. The music is alright and catchy. The gameplay is pretty terrible. The way you have to try to fight enemies and run up and hit them and things like that is, kind of to be expected for early N64 games. It's kind of like the way you can punch in Mario 64, that, you're going to run up and swing and you're standing right next to them, you're still going to miss because they didn't quite understand camera angles back then. And it's just fairly awkward. It's just a typical collectathon game, fairly corny. Nothing really bad. I mean, it's just okay. So you'll definitely have to try harder on your next challenge if you want to get me. So let's move on to the part where we talk about games that we're currently playing and possibly games that we're looking forward to in the future.
Yeah, so we've been doing this, I think, for the last few episodes. We've been playing Dark Souls. I've had probably one of the reasons for us taking so long in the next recording is just a lot of my travel for work. So I finally got off of a crazy month of traveling. I think I've traveled 3 weeks out of the 4 for April. So I'm finally being able to do a podcast here with you. And yeah, so I got back into Dark Souls. Got past the Elithral Dungeon, which was nice. I am now in the Profane Capital and going through that. I've actually muscled my way through a good bit of that. I'm currently stuck on which part is it? The baby tarantula things? I don't know what they are, but they're basically giant hands that have a butt and legs, and they open up like a tarantula and spit out at you. Somebody must have been smoking crack while they were creating this thing. But it's interesting. I'm stuck on that part right now and trying to kill. There's a set of 3 of them currently, and they just have a ridiculous amount of HP and defense. So getting past that's a little challenging right now. So maybe you can help me with that a bit. So that's currently what I'm playing on that end, at least individually / with a friend. And then the fiance and I just we finally just decided to open it up. It's been sitting on the shelf sealed. Mario Rabbids, actually. And I'm actually a little surprised as to how much I'm enjoying it. It, to me, just kind of felt like Splatoon or like a tactical shooting game, but it's actually got some interest to it. There's no story so far from what I've seen that like really engages with you. It's more of a gameplay aspect, but we're having fun. I mean, jumping on different characters, we're doing the 1v1 battle against each other, or 3v3 technically, and I mean, I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not too deep into it. She and I will probably play it later tonight, and yeah, that's about it on the currently playing side of things. What are you currently playing?
I've been waiting on you to get back so we can go back to playing Dark Souls 3. I've been playing a lot of Call of Duty World War II lately, just mostly because it's, you can hop in a game and get out, and the challenges, they have various, they call them orders, and of course there's contracts you can pick up that just mostly do dumb things. I pick up the ones that get supply drops, which are kind of like loot boxes, except you don't pay for them. You have to do things in game to earn them. And they open them, they give you random, like, oh, here's a new uniform, or here's a gun skin, or just dumb stuff like that. But it keeps it a little more interesting because it gives you challenges. Like, you need to get, 30 headshots with this particular gun and stuff like that. So it keeps it fresh. I am still enjoying it on PC despite the rampant wall hacking and the horrible lag compensation. The update before last, I haven't got to play since this very last update as a few days ago. They screwed something up severe in the netcode and the lag compensation. Like, everyone just go, it's lag. It's not lag, it's lag compensation. And what that is the server trying to balance out between what you're seeing and the other players are seeing, where they are on the map, who shot first, etc. So that's why the frustration of, you know very well that you shot first, but when it shows the kill cam, it shows something ridiculous like they came around the corner and saw you first or something like that. That's a side effect of the lag compensation. Unfortunately, it has a side effect where it almost punishes the people with the better internet. It's pretty sad. There's actually a trick that a lot of people have been using, I might try, where they've been switching to wireless that's going to increase your latency as as in how long the information takes to get to the server versus being hardwired, and it basically tricks the lag compensation to either balance out or give you an advantage to try to keep up with other people. It's terrible, but I was playing The Darkness on PlayStation 3. Again, I beat it years ago. I really, really enjoy the game, except the gameplay itself is fairly terrible. It has not aged well at all, but the story, the voice acting is all phenomenal. I mean, it's just like highly recommend. Anyone, is like curious, definitely pick it up and try it. It's a very cheap game, but since the gameplay is pretty terrible, I would actually recommend to most people just go on YouTube and just type in, The Darkness, 1080p, movie, cutscenes, whatever. There's a very popular thing where a lot of people will go through a game and they'll just record all the story parts in clear high definition, and you can just watch it like a movie, which is really the whole worth of playing that game, is to just, watch the story unfold and things like that. Again, that's about it as far as what I'm playing. We could talk about games that are coming up. I actually finally got around to checking out Agony this morning. I know a lot of people have been talking about it, and I've been seeing a lot of, oh, Agony's up for pre-order, but we can't show you pictures of the game because it's so terrible. So here's pictures of puppies and stuff like that. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some videos probably late last year, and I was actually pretty excited when I saw it. I like survival horror games to begin with, and so yeah, I saw the videos. I like the concept. You're in hell, you're trying to escape. Survival horror, you've got demons and naked things everywhere and babies floating in blood and gore. So I think it's an interesting concept. I don't recall anything outside, like maybe if you looked at like a Dante's Inferno and tried to compare it as far as like the story and like where it's taking place, but I don't recall anything like this being created in the past. So I think it's a very interesting concept. Looking forward to it. It's cheap. I want to say it's $40 the pre-order, or if you pick it up on Amazon Prime, it's $31. Same with Best Buy. If you have the 20% Gamers Club discount, you can pick it up at a discount on that too. So, for a game that's slated to be somewhere in the 12 to 14 hour range, $30, survival horror, I think it'll be pretty cool just to pick up and play through. Quick pick up and beat type game. So I'm actually pretty excited about it. And the other one that you and I were talking about recently was Vampire, which will be, I think it comes out later this year, where you essentially play as a newly created vampire and you're trying to stop the order of vampires. And a lot of people have compared it to essentially Dishonored, but with vampires. So I enjoyed this Dishonor. I like vampires. I think you put the two together and it should be pretty cool. So what are your thoughts on that one?
As far as Agony, now that I know it's going to be a $40 or less game, that improves my opinion of it slightly. What I watched earlier was, of course, I watched a couple of trailers and I was just like, Then I watched an actual gameplay of the area they call the forest. And you look it up on YouTube, it'll be the first that comes up. But what I was observing is, like, gameplay wise, doesn't look like there's much to it. It looks more like, it's going to be more of a cinematic experience. The thing I find interesting is, I don't know if anyone's asked them or if the creators have flat out said it, but there is very, very obviously a lot of influence from Clive Barker and his stories, that are going into the game, and the way they're envisioning hell, especially the maze and the sexuality of it and things like that. A lot of people have seen the Hellraiser movies, especially the latter ones, which are just cheesy gore-fest movies, but the interesting correlation, besides like the obvious themes of sexuality and pain and torment and hell, is the strange unnervingness of it. Like a lot of Clive Barker stories, anyone who's never sat down and really read one of his stories or one of his short stories, I can't really describe any of them to you, because if I just describe them, it's like, well, that just sounds dumb. But when you're actually reading them, it does like a very good job of just really getting under your skin psychological wise. It's very hard to describe. So if anyone's curious, I would highly recommend it. I cannot remember the name of the book that the original Hellraiser movie is based on. It's something Other Heart, but you can easily Google that, obviously. But also definitely check out his short stories, some of the old Hellraiser comics and Clive Barker comics and things like that. As far as Vampire, I would say it definitely looks like Dishonored with vampires. I like some of the small details, that he's actually a doctor and you have a lot of choice in. You're supposed to have a lot of choice and consequence in the game. So I think that's a good idea. I noted earlier that they're saying like they're trying to stick with the old vampire myths, such as they can't enter a home or a residence unless they're invited in, and things like that is one of the gameplay implementations. So I'm curious to see how it's going to go. It's going to be very story heavy. And there's been a lot of hype surrounding it, since it came out. So I really hope they do a good job. So that's about what I have to say about that. Have you picked up anything new recently that's worth talking about?
Worth talking about, probably not. As you know, I will pick up things that are cheap as can be whenever I can and look cool. So I picked up Venetica, which is a PS3 RPG. I think it's, as far as I recall, the general premise is it's Daughter of Death, and then I think she dies in a trailer that I watched, and essentially she gains powers, obviously being a Daughter of Death. And so I don't know the full story yet. I just know that it's an RPG from the standpoint of, I guess similar to Dark Souls, in that you've got your weapon pickups and stuff, and it's very much hack and slash RPG style. So from what I've seen, probably not something I'm going to play anytime soon, but it was $3, so why not? Also picked up Yonder, which looks to me like a non-combat version of Legend of Zelda, the Breath of the Wild. So very artistic in terms of the colors. Kind of gave me like a Wind Waker feel while watching the trailers and such. Doesn't look like a collectathon type thing. It looks more like puzzle based. There's like this dark presence that's essentially taken over where you're at. There's like 8 different worlds that you can go to, varying from snow to beaches to mountains. So it just looked like a pretty, I guess a beautiful game in terms of the art style and direction. It's something I actually really like in a game. And fiance seemed to be interested in it and saying that she might want to play too. So obviously that's a plus, finding a game that the two of us can enjoy on PS4. And yeah, so that was it on that end. And then I also hit up some garage sales the other day. Didn't find anything, pretty much skunked out, but I did grab God of War 1 and 2 remastered on the PS3 for like $5. So thought it was a no-brainer. It was right there, perfect condition, booklet, cover, all that good stuff, so figured I'd pick it up. But yeah, that's all I've picked up. Did you get anything recent in the last few weeks?
Yeah, a little bit. I was going to say, I think any AAA PS3 game for $5 is a no-brainer, period. But I myself, the 2 pickups I've had recently, honestly, are just more the collector's itch than anything. For instance, I recently purchased Dark Souls 3, the Fire Fades edition, even though I had the Dark Souls 3 Collector's Edition. I had pre-ordered it. I paid directly for the DLC. But essentially, I bought it, the disc version with the DLC for 2 reasons. One, because I really want to support that franchise, which is, fairly rare for me. If I really, really love a game series like I do Dark Souls, then yeah, I'll be that sucker that will buy, I'm going to buy Dark Souls Remaster on PS4. It's just derp. Obviously, I'm not going to be paying full price for it because, I have my ways, but I'm going to do it just because, it's like, look, I really love you guys' stuff. I'm going to, give you my money to say, hey, I really like this. The Dark Souls games are one of the few games that I'll actually pre-order or pay full retail for when it comes out. As far as that, also, by the way, anyone who's been curious to try it, the Fire Fades edition for Xbox One and PS4 has been regularly on sale for $20 on Best Buy, and if you have the GCU Gamers Club unlocked, that's $16. And they just consistently keep selling out. The first time it happened, it just sold out for weeks. It's like, oh, you can only get it in the store, and of course my store didn't have any. And I just kept looking. It's like, whoop! The moment it came back in stock, I went ahead and got it ordered. And it looks like I think it was sold, either available or sold out again already. The other game I picked up, mostly for a collector's itch, is Tiny Barbarian DX, the launch edition. Specifically, it seems like, I think it's either pronounced Nicalis or Nicalis, whatever that company is. they're bothering to actually put manuals in their Switch games and sometimes little extras. And strangely enough, I saw Tiny Barbarian pop up, a few weeks back, and I was just like, whatever. It comes with a keychain and a little pouch or whatever and a manual. No big deal. I'll catch it later on. Then I started thinking about it more. It's like, what? I kind of want to try it. I'd like to have that game. I want the launch edition to have, the extra freebies in it. And then I noticed it was just pretty much gone. You couldn't find it in the stores in my area. I went to 2 Walmarts, 2 Targets, and a Best Buy. And then on eBay, I had the price I was wanting to pay, and then noticed they would just immediately just start either selling out or getting bid up, and then just start disappearing rapidly. So I finally just broke down and paid the $27 so I can make sure I got the launch edition, so I can, feel happy hey, I got what I wanted, but it's shelf dressing. It'll sit on the shelf until I finally try it, and I might like it, I might not. That's the way collecting goes. Sometimes we're weird little hoarders like that. And speaking of which, as I imagine a lot of people listening to our podcast are retro or just game collectors, period, and probably collectors of other things, there's always the topic that comes up of hoarding versus collecting. At some point, how do you decide when something is junk and you just need to throw it out? Where's the fine line? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can see it both ways. I mean, if you looked in my closet and saw the boxes of old consoles, you'd probably say it's hoarding. But if you looked at my wall, you'd say it's collecting. So, there's a line, I guess, that needs to get drawn on that. So right now in my game room, I've got a ton of stuff that I just need to get rid of. Older consoles that I've got duplicates of, games that I have duplicates of. Trying to sell them, but I'm kind of like you in the respect that if I'm selling something, I like to pass on that discount to somebody else. If I'm selling locally and a game is going, let's say $20 on eBay, I try to list it for 30% off that price locally. Obviously, you end up getting people who just aren't interested and want to get it for pennies on the dollar, so they don't get it sold too. But yeah, I mean, I see it both ways. My fiance comes in a room, sees a bunch of games lying around, it's hoarding. I see it as stuff that needs to get sold or be put on the shelf and cleaned, and when it does get put on the shelf or sold or whatever it may be, that space clears up. So, I'm kind of torn on it. I would say there are some positives and negatives overall to it. So, for me, I've got, I want to say on count 20 GameCube controllers. It's not because I'm hoarding a bunch of GameCube controllers and they're just going to sit there. It's the idea of having backups. I've gone far too many times having a controller blow out on me and having to go pick it up for whatever price point. If I can find a GameCube controller for $3-4 and store it away, and then another one busts down the road, I just got to grab my GameCube controller. It was $3 or $4 for a name brand controller versus going off and picking one up offline for $15-20. So that's kind of the mentality on that. That is a positive. For restoration purposes, when I have extra consoles, if I have extra controllers, anything of that nature, I can always pull out little parts from each one. I've had N64s, for example, I've had bad shells. If I've got a shell lying around, I swap it out, toss out the broken shell, now I've got a new shell. So it's kind of a mentality on keeping a lot of those items, is you never know when you're going to come across it. If you toss it, then you're going to have to go out and buy it and spend money when you had it the entire time. So and there's going to be people that would argue that it's hoarding. I see it as collecting and backup. As far as the negative, what's that?
Go ahead with the negative.
Yeah, as far as the negative, yeah, I mean, it is a waste of space sometimes to have all of that lying around. If you don't have the knowledge necessarily, I have limited knowledge, but I have enough to kind of get by with soldering and replacing caps and that type of stuff. If you don't have that knowledge, then it's really a waste of space and a waste of your time. If you've got an old console and you're trying to pull the caps or something off of that one and replace it on your previously working console, if you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to bust both consoles and it's a waste of your time. The other issue, as far as a negative with collecting, per se, is we don't know how long this stuff's going to last, in my opinion. I mean, you've got batteries essentially in SNES and NES games and in 64 games that if they blow out, you got to replace them all. It's a pain in the ass process. Disc rot is a thing that's kind of coming up for a lot of old CD-based games like the PlayStation and Sega CD and Saturn. And then you've got, I think, DVDs. They say, what is lifespan? Like 30 years on DVDs. So a lot of my games I've already had 15 years. Some of them close to 20, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's just in the long haul, how long are these games actually going to last? Am I going to be able to play them all? Obviously not, because I have so many. But the ones that I really want to enjoy and just kind of have on the back burner right now, am I ever going to get to play those because they're going to rot and get destroyed? So, yeah.
Absolutely. Bit rot, that's the term you were looking for, absolutely is something that's going to happen and does happen, period. Unfortunately, there's no avoiding it. I started collecting about 10 years or so ago, and in that time, I've only had maybe a handful of carts that were just dead, and they were either dead because maybe they had bad resistors or bad capacitors, because very few, but not too often, sometimes the NES carts have those in them, but the mask ROM chips they can fail. They fail from bit rot. It just happens. It's not necessarily. I've learned all sorts of tricks over the years as far as refurbishing or repairing the connectors to make sure they'll work and things like that. And sometimes they're just done. As far as the bit rot, generally, if I recall correctly, a good quality made DVD that's kept in ideal conditions will last 50 to 100 years. However, I'm sure ideal conditions consist of being stored in a jewel case in a perfect temperature environment and only being read so many times and things like that. Because although the intensity of the laser that's reading those discs is not intense enough to actually damage things, but the spinning and things like that, bit rot's going to happen. As far as the game chip bit rot, far as I know, the only real way to test for that is to desolder and remove the chips from the cartridge and plug it into a ROM chip reading device or something like that, and do maybe a checksum, check against it, things like that. The discs are fairly straightforward. If you get a nice bright light and pick up your disc and just stare at the label side and hold it up to the light, if you start seeing little pinhole marks in it, that is bit rot, whereas literally the dye that is sprayed onto the disc that the data is actually burned into when they're created and pressed at the factory is actually literally rotting away. It's very common with laserdisc collectors. It happens. So Sega CD, TurboGrafx CD, things like that, Neo Geo CD, that's gonna start happening. It's gonna happen with PS2 games, especially. Actually, it happens now. It's common, not unusual for the CD base, which are the blue bottom PS2 games, for them to look perfectly fine, no scratch inside or anything like that, and they are just not readable because they're very thin, they will warp, bit rot sets in, things like that. As far as, after a while, trying to hang on to stuff and restoring stuff becomes a waste of time. I'm certainly a fan. My preference controller wise is to have at least double the amount of controllers I would expect to need. I have at least four NES controllers, at least four Super Nintendo controllers, and so on and so forth, just in case. But the same thing is going to happen with them. Their pads are eventually going to start to rot away and things like that. That will eventually happen. I myself am a fan of trying to refurbish and recycle whatever I can, but a lot of things I don't have the electronics repair expertise to do properly, such as that time I was trying to fix the Game Gear that, I can't remember, I believe it would power on, but the screen, of course, had the screen issue, and I was playing with it, and after about the fifth time of me shocking myself while I'm sitting there fiddling with it, trying to determine if I can use hot air to do the screen repair, which if anyone's looked up a video, they'll say, oh yeah, take your solder iron, drag it across here. It's a terrible idea, but if it works, it works. But in addition to that, Game Gears are a great example of they almost always need a full capacitor replacement. I think there's 10 or 15 caps that are very small, pain in the ass to get to, that need to be done. And those are just some examples. Other things like resistors will go bad. You need to understand how to test them. We don't have schematics for these things, and so on and so forth. And it's a fact of collecting. As far as hoarding, I'm pretty good about letting things go. I've sold chunks of my collection before. I sold my Dreamcast collection back when the Shenmue 3 was announced and the Dreamcast games hit their peak and everyone was going ape shit for them. I almost felt bad because the guy didn't even haggle. He was just like, "Phew, here's exactly what you asked for." I was like, all right. And I see that happen a lot, especially in Facebook collecting groups, that people are just, "Oh, I don't care. I'm just going to spend the money. Well, I don't care what it's worth or blah, blah, blah. Here you go. I just want, I want, I want." And there's always going to be people that want to take advantage of that. One of the things I started to do, years after I started collecting, is like, I'm gonna start picking up and hanging on to any label variants. Like, oh, this one has this NES game has the round seal, but this one has the oval seal. And after a while, I was like, that's dumb. I'm not gonna do that. I don't need 2 or 3 copies of Super Mario World or Super Mario Brothers that have all the slight label variations to them. The only exception for that to me is the original NES greatest hits re-releases, such as the yellow label Metroid, or the gray with gold labels Zelda 1 and 2, and the Mike Tyson's Punch Out versus the later released Punch Out. And these are actual later releases of the games that were repackaged and just done differently. To me, I'll hang on to those, or if it's something really interesting. Like a friend of mine has Jurassic Park on Super Nintendo, but the label's upside down. Like, it came like that from the factory. Like, the label's on there, but they printed it upside down somehow. And it's just one of those things. Something like that would be cool to hang on to. But I say we should probably move on to talking about Nintendo's... not just Nintendo and I think Sega still owns Shenmue, but their semantics and what they're doing in the marketplace right now, such as the whole tropical freeze thing, or the tropical refreeze, whatever you want to call it. What do you think of that?
I'm a huge Donkey Kong fan. It's actually one of my favorite sets of games. So I mean, you've seen what I've got at my house. I've got multiple Donkey Kong posters, Donkey Kong memorabilia. Like, I like Donkey Kong. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I actually recall talking to you because, sorry, you were buying specific Nintendo Power issues just so you could get the Donkey Kong Country posters out of them.
Yep, and I got all of them, and they look sweet. So, so yeah, I mean, I love the game series. As far as Tropical Freeze is concerned, fantastic game. I beat it on the Wii U. Really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Definitely a nice kickback to the classic titles. As far as what's going on right now with Nintendo, I think it's just BS. I see it as, we didn't sell enough of these consoles, the Wii U that is, so we're going to go ahead and just rehash a bunch of remakes and send them off to the the Switch. And the reason I was about to say PlayStations, it reminds me back when the transition period between like PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, and then 2 and 3, and I guess 3 and 4, where you're getting a lot of these re-releases because they figure, oh, well, people didn't get to pick it up on the previous console, so we're going to sell it at full price on the next console, which to me just, I mean, I get why they're doing it. It's more money, but it's a little ridiculous. I mean, I don't like it. And then just saying, well, we're going to throw in some bonus content, such as like Funky Kong gets thrown into the new game and some new map development and such. Like, in my opinion, the way this should be done, and I think, I want to say Activision did this a while back with the new Call of Duty games when they just released the Xbox One. I want to say they allowed people to bring in their copy of, I think it was Black Ops 2, and they could trade it into GameStop for, if it wasn't the full amount, it was close to it, for a copy of the Xbox One game to help them transition over. And to me, I think that's something Nintendo can do. It can get a lot of people that were on the Wii U and are still playing that console, maybe haven't jumped over to Switch. That's the way to do that. Trade in your older games, get a good bit of value for them because you've gone ahead and upgraded to the next console, and you get the next game. I think that's a fair way to do it. This whole thing of rehashing games and adding 1 or 2 extra things, like, the Mario Kart that's on the Switch, like, I'm not picking that up. There's no point for me to do it because I picked it up on the Wii U. I enjoyed my time with it. I'm not going to pick it up on the Switch. It's kind of pointless to me. So I'm seeing that right now a lot in the market. A lot of HD remakes and everything. I don't know. I'm kind of iffy on it overall as the subject is concerned. And then the whole Shenmue 1 and 2 Essentially, I'm going to use quotation marks here, updated version. It's pretty much just an upscale of the older games. Like, I don't see why I can't just plug in my Dreamcast, throw it into an HD upscaler, and then be done with it. Like, that's essentially what you're getting. And it's a good price point, at least. They're offering it for $30 for the two of them. But it's just, I don't get it.
I myself, I totally get it. I forgot the gentleman's name, but the newly announced president of Nintendo, I would say Nintendo of Japan, but he's the president of Nintendo Corporation. Taking over. They finally picked a full successor for Iwata. Or Iwata. All you fanboys can just just from me mispronounce his name. But anyhow, one of the things he first said is they're going to be pushing very strongly into the mobile gaming market. And on the one hand, that makes sense because mobile gaming in Japan is extremely popular. And that has a lot to do with lack of space and things like that. But you might think, we're just ripping on DK Tropical Freeze, but there are so many games like Mario Kart, Captain Toad, 2 or 3 others I can't remember. They're literally just ports of the Wii U games. We're just going to port it over, add some very minute features. We don't even have to tweak the graphics much because now we have a slightly more powerful graphics chips that will do what we were able to do before. Tropical Freeze, I find it interesting that the only real notable changes to it is that the easy mode, which is you get to play as Funky Kong. Funky Kong is essentially the easy mode. I haven't played Tropical Freeze, but I've heard and that is brutally difficult as far as a platformer. And it's just funny. It's like, oh, we added this. I was like, all right, that's cool. Y'all probably should have added that to begin with because this is definitely a game that would appeal to children. And I grew up with the Nintendo, so my opinion is kids just need to learn. It's like, yeah, shit's hard, deal with it, But as far as Shenmue, I find that I actually looked into it, and that's why because I told you, I was like, look, they're not changing anything. They're literally just upscaling it. They're not even we're not upgrading the visuals, we're not adding anti-aliasing or anything like that to smooth over the edges. They're pretty much just stretching it, like you said, as if you just plugged in through your Dreamcast into an HDMI upscaler, which honestly the upscaler might actually look better in this case. But I think the whole Shenmue thing it's a direct side effect of the internet culture hype train that everyone's on this nostalgia kick for thing, and even kids that never got to experience it are like, oh my god, I always heard this was so great. Don't get me wrong, Shenmue, when it came out, was something really special. It was totally different, very interesting, but nowadays, before I sold my Dreamcast collection, I was like, I'm gonna go back and play Shenmue, from way back when. I played it, a couple years after it came out, and I was just like, oh god, this game is, just bad. We're so spoiled nowadays. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to run into. I'm glad that the price point is cheap, so it's definitely going to gather some fans. I never bothered to play Shenmue 2 because I heard it just really wasn't any better than the first one, and with that, I don't recall if we've actually heard anything about Shenmue 3. What I find interesting, though, is with that same announcement of the Shenmue re-release, because it's not a remaster, it's not a remake or anything, it's a port, it's another port, is Sega officially announced, we're going to put out, a Sega Classic or a Mega Drive Classic if you're in Europe or Australia. I find that funny because the company AT Games, which have done the Atari plug directly into your TV games, has been producing these little, we call them Genesis Model 4 consoles for years now. Every year around Christmas, they'll re-release it with slightly different mix of games on it, with different box art, and it runs $40 or so. You pick them up at the dollar stores. They get the job done. They're horrible. They come with these terrible infrared wireless controllers that it's infrared, so you got to point it at the console and things like that. So I think it's funny that Sega has been licensing this out and licensing their games out, and now that the nostalgia wave has made Nintendo even fatter off the NES Classic and Super Nintendo Classic, then Sega's just like, well, duh, why aren't we doing this? And honestly, good for them, especially if the price point is a little more fair. I think $80 for either one of the NES Classic or Mini whatever or Super Nintendo Classic, I think is just a little ridiculous, in my opinion. But what would be really cool is to have like, I know the Neo Geo X came out years ago, didn't sell very well at all. It was expensive back then. It's insanely expensive now because it's a collector's item. But things like that would be great because I totally understand not everyone understands or is comfortable with emulation. Because a lot of emulators are just real super easy to use. But that's about what I think about that. I mean, the point I forgot to mention about the whole DK Tropical Refreeze. A good friend of mine pointed it out to me as he is not just a game collector, he is a Nintendo collector. Like he's specifically like, if you try to get him to play a Sega game, he'll just throw the controller at you. It's just, he's weird like that. But we were talking about it, it's like, and I was pointing out how Tropical Freeze is just a port. It's literally a rehash. And then, of course, we both brought up, like, oh, yeah, they actually, right before they released it, they pulled it from the Virtual Console. So you can just buy the digital copy for, I think, like $20 or something on the Wii U. And in addition to that, he pointed out to me, I didn't ever realize that the original Tropical Freeze on Wii U retailed for $50. This new version is the full $60. And they pulled the cheaper version off the Virtual Console, so you have to buy it. You either have to go find a used copy, get lucky and run across some store that might still have Wii U games in stock and find a copy there, which, a lot of retailers will just like, oh, well, we're just going to charge you $60 no matter what console it's on. Or it's, oh, buy a Switch and buy the same damn game again, which is a lot of what they're pulling. And that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I did note that recently, too, that they're charging $60 for a game that was initially launched at $50. And, I mean, I get the whole... it's a different
cartridge tax.
What was that?
The cartridge tax, the excuse they're using.
Yeah. I mean, I get all that, but at the same time, I mean, you're using more plastic and everything else for the Wii U than you were on the Switch. So I don't think the difference is that much in terms of production. I'm not in that industry, so not fully sure. But on the outside looking in, it seems like a lot less plastic is being used now than it was before.
I certainly concur on that. Sorry, because here's a good example why that whole cartridge tax, the slang term where we have for it, they're like, oh, it's got to cost more because it's a physical cartridge, is BS. Wolfenstein 2, the New Order that's coming out on the Switch, is a perfect example of that. Bethesda, I think it's Bethesda that does Wolfenstein, I could be wrong. They're opting to use smaller cartridges and force the owners, the players who are going to buy this game for the Switch for whatever reason, to actually have to download the rest of the content, whereas they could have used a larger cartridge base. And frankly, essentially the technology that's being used for the Switch cartridges is more or less SD cards, flash NAND technology, and it really doesn't cost that much. Anyone who's going out and shopping like, oh, I can get a micro SD card, I'll just say off the top of my head, if you poke around, you can easily find a 128 gigabyte SD card for $40 and oftentimes less than that, depending on the quality and speed. So I think that's another example of just, the corporations know they have everyone, that people will just buy whatever. And be like, oh, well, we'll just charge you full $60 for this game that you're only getting half the data on this cartridge, and you have to download the other half. Oh, you have to go buy an SD card to do that. And it's just silly, especially in places where folks live that bandwidth caps are mandatory, that they're only allowed, so many gigabytes a month per data, and they're going to have to chew through it by downloading an additional 30 or 40 gigabytes of data just to be able to play the game that they just paid full price for. Is ridiculous in my opinion. It's not just update patches, it's literally the rest of the game. It's, to play this, you need to download your game that you just bought a physical copy of.
Yeah, no, it's completely ridiculous, and the best thing for the market to do is just not buy it. I mean, honestly, just if it's available on PlayStation 4 and you happen to have that console, buy it on PS4. Unless they're going to do the same thing, which I would not doubt. In addition to Nintendo, I think Nintendo's on a pretty good streak right now, just releasing ported over crap and garbage. I mean, I've been bashing the Labo for quite some time now, and I think we both shared that video of essentially the review of a Labo in a trailer. It's just hilarious when you look at it. It's just Nintendo is seriously selling cardboard for $80 and shovelware games, and people are eating it up. It's just crazy. And I love how the video that we both shared on the Game Deflators Facebook page essentially says Nintendo's decided that the best way to save money is to get rid of manufacturing the plastic items and make you develop it yourself with cardboard. I could not stop laughing at that. That video was awesome the way it covered it. And yeah, I mean, just in general, Nintendo's on a pretty good streak right now of just releasing trash, in my opinion. And they really need to get a hang on releasing some of those better games, like the new Yoshi game and maybe a new Mario game outside of Odyssey.
Is the new Yoshi game actually a new game, or is it just another port of Yoshi's Woolly World?
I want to say it's a new game altogether. I don't believe it's a port.
Finally, yeah. Maybe they should do another proper Yoshi's Island or something.
Yeah, because like the Kirby game that just came out, Kirby All Stars, I don't think that was a port. That was its own game as well.
That one I don't think did too well, but it's actually, at least it's different. Also, I find it strange how fast they're cranking out Kirby games. Just like, what the crap, man. But maybe hey, people...
Maybe Kirby's not popular enough. They need to crank out more and infect the masses.
Possibility. One thing I made notice of when I was out searching for that tiny barbarian last week is, as I looked around, the sections for the Nintendo Switch in each store was like very, very, very small, like one section of this shelf, whereas the Xbox One and PS4 would have 4 or 5 of those sections. And all the stores I went to, and I noticed, is like, for this to be like the highest selling console, all the retailers, of course, it's a given. All they care about is selling the first party games, because everyone's going to want Mario and Zelda and this, that, and other. But I see so much ported shovelware coming out for the Switch just rapidly. I mean, just like, hey, this game is like, what the shit is this? It's almost like when the Wii was at the end of its life, except it's happening right now. It is just maddening, and it's just it's kind of funny. And I really think, it's going to go the way of the Wii and the Wii U, except the Wii U didn't sell as well as the Wii, which is a shame, because the Wii U's had a lot of great, really fun games, and if you can get one for cheap, definitely pick one up. But it's, that effect's already starting to happen, whereas like right now Nintendo's doing a fairly good job of pushing out games. Unfortunately, they're ports of games that we've already bought. Some of you haven't, and I totally get that. But, I don't want to hear I didn't get Wolfenstein on my PS4, blah, 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 blah. It's like, hey, good for you. You don't own a PS4, cool. You want to play, a slightly watered down version, whatever. But they're not pushing out new IPs. They're not pushing out something new and unique, except for Blabo, which, I mean, honestly, it's just, they might as well just put out like a new WarioWare game. It would probably be a shitload more fun, and then you don't have a bunch of, leftover cardboard shavings and, cutouts to have to throw in the garbage and, things like that.
Yeah, right there with you. Actually, I just thought of something. My local stores out here in the West, they actually have brand new Wii games sitting in the shelf, as well as Wii U games and Switch games. So I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, no, I was just looking. There's I forget the first part of the title, but Sin and Punishment on the Wii. Mm-hmm. Tons of copies here. Lots of copies of shovelware games all over the place at the Walmart, Best Buy, Target. All of them have Wii and Wii U games available. It's the oddest thing.
You better get to crack and see if you can get one of those Hello Kitty racers.
I've been looking, trust me, I have not found one.
And the Barnyard Rocket, whatever the hell. But
yeah, that and the Crudes, I think, is the other one.
Oh yeah, the Crudes.
Yeah. Which is stupid because I came across it like 5 times in the past and never bought it. So now I'm like, God damn it.
Me too. I'm just like, I saw the first time Toys R Us did their whole video game like clearance a couple of years ago. I was just like, I won't what the hell this is. I'm not giving you $4 for it. Well, screw me, huh? Anyhow, well, we're coming up to the end of our podcast, so this is a point where we get to announce the next crappy game challenge for each other. And John, since you didn't even make it near the underwater dam level, since you didn't complete it, you're not going to get your cookie. Instead, the game I have picked out for you from your collection is Army Men Air Attack on the PlayStation 1.
Oh, I'm so happy you chose that, because I actually love the Army Men games growing up, so this should be fun.
Oh, so, this should be fun. I look forward to it ruining your childhood.
It probably will. So, I want to say you do have this one. My choice for you, and if you don't, you got to play it on emulator.
All right.
Bible Adventures on a Nintendo. Enjoy.
Oh yeah, which do you want me to play, the blue or the black one?
The blue one.
Okay, yeah, I can totally do that. I've played it
Yeah.
before, so I was like,
Well, then that's
you-
not fun.
yeah, I'll give you, if you can think of another one off the top of your head, I'll give you a second shot. You know, because I can totally kill 30 minutes on that. It's just like, whatever.
Renegade NES.
Oh, you motherfucker. Wait, do I
That's
have? I probably do own it.
And if you don't, emulate.
Fuck. Yeah, because I actually like remember trying my damnedest to beat that game as a kid. That game is a fucking bitch. So
Well,
yeah,
then,
all right.
I guess I'm gonna ruin your childhood too.
No, even as a kid, I thought the game was too fucking hard. So yeah, fair enough. All right,
right.
so Renegade on the NES for me, and Army Men Air Attack on the PlayStation 1 for you.
You know what's gonna make it even better? I'm gonna play it on a 55-inch flat screen.
I was gonna say you should actually dig out your PSX console and like don't play it on the PS3 with the smoothing. Actually, plug in your PSX.
We're gonna get the worst experience possible here. It is a crappy game challenge, so PlayStation 3 upscaling on a HDR TV it is.
It'll
All right.
it'll be interesting. It's still gonna be a matter of like, the fuck is that? Everything is like gray and green, you know?
Yeah, I remember playing that with my brother, and I think it was Sarge's Heroes 2, and there was a Hornet gun, and we had a lot of fun playing that game growing up. But as far as Air Attack is concerned, I guess we'll find out how bad the graphics actually are right now. I haven't plugged in one of those games in a long time.
All right, well that about wraps it up for me. You have anything else left to say?
Nope. I think we are good. Just to rehash a game challenge for everybody. So essentially, we're going to be playing 30 minutes each. No crazy task that needs to be completed. Just 30 minutes. Try and get as far as you can and complete as much of the gameplay as possible to really get that crappy game feel. So that's what James and I will be doing. And hopefully we got another podcast coming up pretty regularly here. Maybe in the next couple weeks, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. All right, well, we appreciate y'all listening to the Game Deflators Podcast. My name is James,
My name is John.
and we'll talk to y'all next time.